Mi nombre es Borrell. Ah, Me gustaría dar mi presentación en español. Por lo tanto, he estado estudiando español desde el año pasado y también este año. Porque tengo un gran problema. Escucho la radio latina y obviamente no habla la lengua la misma que está estudiando. Entonces, lo siento, pero I need to give my presentation in English. You know you're in trouble when the translator translates my Spanish into real Spanish. So what I wanted to do is just take maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and we're running a little bit late. I'll get us back on track and talk about the monetization of content in the way that you haven't heard it. And that is, I don't think we have, and we had this discussion during lunch, a great opportunity to charge for content in the way that we charge for content in our newspapers when it comes to the internet. Because the Google guy will let everybody find the content that's free instead of going to, sorry, I don't mean to blame you, instead of going to the content where someone's going to subscribe. The model has been tried in the United States. And while some newspapers are making money off of charging for subscription content, most of the content out there is free. And the research that we have as a company has discovered that people at the local level will not pay much money at all for local content. They will pay less than $1 per month. That is because there's so much content out there, they can find other free sources of it. So I want to change your thinking maybe about how to operate in this new digital environment where you're really not going to get much money for subscription revenue. There is some, but it's not going to be much. So I'm going to talk about what's happening in media. The other thing I'm going to do is tell you how much money people are making. This is a big mystery. How much money can you make monetizing your content, particularly with advertising, but also with subscription fees? We did a study of 7,000 local businesses and found that most of them are planning to increase their digital budgets or their digital advertising even more. And that the biggest decreases in advertising would be for newspapers and for yellow pages. So the advertising available to newspapers or print is declining. The advertising that is migrating toward the internet continues to increase. We developed the food chain for media, the weakest and the strongest, and what we discovered is that newspapers and online were the strongest. That is, they got the greatest share of advertisers to spend money with them, newspapers and online media, and they took the greatest share of the budget. And other types of media, radio and television and yellow pages were at the lower end of that food chain. But as we looked at the numbers where advertisers said they were going to change their budgets, what we discovered is that newspapers are beginning to move down into this lower quadrant of all media, and online is way up at the top. So what does this mean toward monetizing content? What we believe is that advertisers have very significant goals to increase their spending online, to drive more traffic to their website, and to drive more likes from Facebook, and to drive more downloads of coupons. And they all have these very digital-centric goals. And they're using existing or traditional media to drive those goals. So the important thing to note here is that digital is first with a lot of these businesses, and that traditional media comes in afterwards to drive those goals. This is happening more and more, and it didn't used to be this way. In fact, when we ask them what drives new businesses, referrals from other customers, which you would expect would be at the top, but digital media was trumping other types of traditional media. So their own website and their own social media site were very, very important to them. What this has to do, and where I'm leading you, is that these customers of yours in print are definitely migrating to online, but they're not going to automatically support your content. They're going to support whatever it is online that drives traffic to them, drives likes to them, drives more page views and leads and things like that. That's what they're paying for. That's why Google has gotten so big. That's why all these lead generation sites, Angie's List and Groupon and the others, which are selling services and generating leads, are so important, because this is what the advertiser wants. So you're operating in a very, very different environment today. The other thing I wanted to show you was that this is how much money that companies can make, and I think this is important because you need to know how much you're chasing after when you go online. When you put your product online, is it $1 million opportunity, a $500,000 opportunity? This is the percentage of revenue that media companies in the United States got last year from digital sales. So you'll see newspaper companies on there averaging about 16%, but some of the bigger ones may get 1/4 of their revenue. And this is a very, very important question, because if you're going to develop all this content and eventually maybe completely go digital, I don't think you're going to get all of your money from digital subscriptions unless you have very, very, very valuable content. It's going to have to come from advertising. So right now what we're seeing is that newspaper, print companies, yellow pages companies are getting the largest share of their total revenue from digital, and there's a good reason for that, and I'll talk about that in a moment, as opposed to television and radio. It's the type of content that these businesses have. You might not think of directories as having content, but they do. And as this shows, they might have the more valuable content when it comes to digital. So when we look at how much each company makes, or each entity, what we're seeing in the United States at least is that newspapers make a little over $2 million in revenue from digital. So the average daily newspaper in the United States makes about $2 million in revenue. That's about 16% of its total advertising revenue. And on down the line for TV stations and radio stations, et cetera. So that's just average, what they make. When you look at what the top 5% make, you might see a newspaper on average making about $2 million, but the top 5% are making far more than that, 10, 15, $20 million. These are the companies we study. These are the ones that are significantly monetizing their content, and their content is very different than what you think. Their content is not just news and sports and weather and things like that. They are using that content, they are putting it out, but they've learned a significant secret. So who wants to be average and generate $2 million in the United States for their digital revenue in a newspaper? Everybody wants to be better than average and generate $10 or $20 million. We are seeing some newspapers now that they're getting 30 to 40% of their total revenue from digital. That's a lot of money. So how are they doing it? What we see is that digital revenue for newspapers, and I'm going to give you this, at the end of this presentation there's a slide or a URL. You can download these slides if you wish. These are some metrics that you can use. This is revenue per unit of circulation by, or revenue by circulation size. So smaller papers make less, larger papers make more. I wanted to give this to you because, again, it's really important to know how well you are doing. From what we've seen from countries in South America, newspaper companies, it's a little bit lower, but not always. Some newspapers are making in Latin America a little bit more than average. Not all newspapers, but some. But this is a good benchmark for you, and I think this is really important because, again, you need to know how much money you're chasing after. If you don't know, if you think it's 10% more than you made last year, you may not invest as much this year. What if what you made last year was $500,000 or $1 million in digital advertising and your potential is 10 million? If you knew that, then it would dictate that you spend more time and resources and money in developing that revenue. So let's talk about this content that I have been alluding to. The content that most media companies, newspapers in particular, have found that they have that's more important is the advertising. In the United States, 51% now of the people who buy a newspaper buy it for the advertising, not the news. Phenomenal. It's an amazing statistic. Because it's the great compendium, it's a great conglomeration group of information about sales in the marketplace. In many U.S. newspapers, and you have it too, there are circulars with coupons. People buy the newspaper for that. Half of the people buy it just for that. That is the important content. For those of you from newsrooms, and I used to be a reporter and an editor, that's a really tough message to hear. I'm not saying that the newsroom content is not important, but I'm saying consider the fact that half of the people, at least in the United States, half of the people who buy a daily newspaper are buying it for the advertising. The advertising tells them what's on sale. It gives them good information. And we see that migrating very quickly to the internet, that information. Once the internet becomes a place for people to go to find out what's on sale today, it's not. But once that happens, newspapers are in even bigger trouble. So what I did here was take the top companies, US companies, in terms of local advertising, digital local advertising. We took out Google, we took out Facebook. So these are the top 20 or so companies in the United States last year in terms of total revenue in selling local digital advertising down at the local level with local sales reps. Google and Facebook are out of here. What do you think is the common characteristic of these companies when it comes to content? If I color-coded this and said, okay, the blue bars represent companies that have nothing but news, or their main content is news and information, the content that we all think is important, and the orange bars would be companies that have nothing but advertising as their content. If I color-coded this chart of the top 20 companies, that's what it would look like. The more important content is advertising because digital is playing at the lower end of the funnel where people go and research something before they buy. Sure, they're reading news about Lindsay Lohan and everybody else on the internet and crazy things that are happening and Bruce Jenner and all that weirdness. And that does, or Caitlyn. And that does create, some advertising opportunities, but the more valuable advertising opportunity for Ford's F-150 truck line or the Ram trucks is someone that's about to research a truck because they're about to buy one, or someone who just did a few days ago. That's the traffic that they're looking for, people who are looking for information before they buy it. This is a big challenge to our news organizations. You might say, well, Gannett, one of the largest media companies in the United States, they have newspapers and TV stations. They're up at the top of that list. That's okay, isn't it? 2/3 of Gannett's $1.2 billion in digital revenue does not come from their newspapers and TV stations. It comes from advertising-only plays, such as Career Builder and others, which is a job site. So that's the starkest message I can give you right there, that you need a sign on your desk if you really want to understand digital and developing digital content that's valuable. The sign should read, "It's the advertising, stupid." It will help you figure out that this is a very different business model. Again, I don't want to say journalism is not important. Certainly in print it is, in broadcast it is, and in digital it will be, and you may continue to see stories broken there, but I have a very, very difficult time seeing the advertising model that supports it. What I want media companies to do is to figure this out, figure out how to make money here that supports great journalism. It might be a charity case, and it's a very good one, but I think your papers, your newspapers are in business, and I'm sorry to tell you this, when it was told to me when I was a reporter, my heart sank. I wanted to quit. That when you think about it, a newspaper is in the business of helping people sell things. Man, when I heard that, I just wanted to die, because I was a reporter, and I thought a newspaper was in the business of informing the public and routing the bad guys and putting great journalism out there. And it is, to a great extent, but it would not exist if it didn't help local businesses and national businesses sell things and meet their goals. So we really have to begin thinking about that a lot more. When you look at this chart that I showed you earlier, the companies that were making the most in the percentage of their total gross revenue that comes from digital, the yellow pages of the companies are at the top. More than half of the revenue at this current moment is coming from digital sales. What is the yellow pages content? Is it news and information? It's advertising. People go to that book when they open the book because they're about to buy something. They're wallet-ready consumers. And this is our big challenge. How do we get to the bottom end of that funnel and find the information about that particular consumer who is about to buy some jewelry or some furniture or a car or about to buy a home? And that's our really big challenge in digital, is to figure out that particular audience. If you don't believe me, this guy you should talk to. He's a friend of mine. His name is Craig. You probably know him because he owns one of the ugliest sites on the internet. It's a horrible site in terms of design. It will never change. I'm convinced it will always look like that. Do you know how much this guy's site made this year? How much he's on track to make this year, giving away free classifieds, and he has a staff of 36 people. That's how much he will make this year. Do you know how much of that is profit? That's how much of that is profit. $400 million in revenue, $300 million in profit. I want that business. Nothing but advertising is content, an important bit of content, I have to tell you. Content about jobs, content about where to go, content about stuff for sale, cars and bicycles and refrigerators and lawnmowers. We have to start thinking this way. This was the domain of the newspaper. Classified ads was the domain of the newspaper, but it got lost to Craigslist, it got lost to eBay, it got lost to other classified sites because we think of content a bit differently. So who are these top performers, the ones that are making the most money? Their key characteristics, I thought I would tell you, is that they pursue specific audiences. So they're looking at audiences that are about to buy something or that have just searched for something. They're not saying, we have a larger and larger and larger and larger sports audience. That doesn't matter to the advertiser. What matters to the advertiser is, I want 18 to 24-year-old females because I have a boutique dress shop, and that's who I want to market to. Well, you might find them in that sports audience, but you're going to have to know about that audience. So they're targeting specific audiences. The top performers also have a greater focus on digital than print. And this is very difficult because print tends to drive 90% of revenues. But I'm telling you, advertisers, the people who are supporting your print product are migrating to digital. They're going to continue. And if you focus a little bit more on digital, a lot more on digital, you might find out that the audience is migrated there as well, and your advertisers are going to be found there. Their staff is more revenue driven. They're not really content driven. They're driven to, how do we make more money? How do we make more money eventually? How do we make more money to support the core product? I'm telling you, it's coming. A lot of Latin American countries, it's very slow compared to the trend in the United States, but it's going to flip and catch up very quickly because of the migration to mobile. Mobile is going to be a great equalizer in countries outside of the United States because so many people are now, have skipped over the PC phenomenon and now collecting information on tablets and smartphones. So it's coming, it's very quick. And I also wanted to mention, I'm not going to spend time on this because we heard about it earlier, native advertising is really a key content play for these companies. When you want to look at content that makes money, native advertising, or call it sponsored content, really works well. You'll find that advertisers, you'll hear from Deseret Media on this, who are first in class in doing this. Native advertising is sponsored content basically, and advertisers are willing to pay a lot of money for it. The reason is they have the medium at their disposal. They've disintermediated you. They've gone direct to consumers. They can send information to consumers or put information on their website that they use to put in the newspaper. Their hours of operations, their specials this week, a coupon, that can all go on their website. They've disintermediated you. They can even put all of their classifieds, all of their listings on their own website. So the deer have the guns. What they really need is you to help them figure out how to market it. And what they really need is people to help them write stuff for their pages and help them market their information. And that's really where native advertising comes to play. So I think we're in the third trimester of the digital impregnation of legacy media companies. And the question is, what will your baby look like? Everybody wants their baby to look really cute. And so you're developing this really cute digital baby, but unfortunately, most people take their baby and make it look like themselves. So I think you have, you recognize that? That person is here somewhere. So I think you've got a really, really good opportunity to see things a bit differently, look at content a bit differently. I hope this has been helpful. There's the URL if you want to download the presentation. And thank you very much.